The spring morning of April 1945 brought no hope to General Klaus von Richter. He sat in the back of a damaged military truck, watching the smoke rise from another burning German village. His uniform was dirty and torn. His face showed the exhaustion of a man who had not slept properly in weeks. Beside him, General Otto Müller stared at a map that no longer made sense. The roads they planned to use were already controlled by Allied forces. The war was ending, and everyone knew it. Just 3 weeks ago, American and Soviet forces had met at the Elbe River, cutting Germany in two. The newspaper spoke of Hitler hiding in his bunker in Berlin while Soviet tanks rolled through the streets. The great German army that once conquered most of Europe now ran like scared rabbits through their own homeland. Von Richter commanded what remained of a Wehrmacht division. 3 months ago, he had 5,000 men. Now, only 300 survived. They had no food supplies. Their ammunition was almost gone. The soldiers looked like walking skeletons in dirty uniforms. Many were just boys, 15 or 16 years old, given rifles and told to die for the fatherland. The convoy of damaged vehicles moved slowly through the Bavarian countryside. The beautiful mountains in the distance seemed to mock their misery. Von Richter remembered when he believed Germany would win this war. That was in 1940, when France fell in just 6 weeks. Now, 5 years later, Germany itself was falling, and falling fast. Müller folded his useless map and threw it on the floor. He was younger than von Richter by 4 years, but he looked older. The war had aged him all. His son had died on the Eastern Front in 1943, frozen to death during the terrible winter outside Stalingrad. Since then, Müller had become quieter, angrier, more desperate. The truck suddenly stopped. Von Richter heard shouting from the front of the convoy. Then he heard something that made his blood turn cold. American voices. English words cutting through the morning air like knives. The ambush came fast and brutal. American soldiers appeared from the tree lines on both sides of the road. They carried the new M1 Garand rifles that could fire 8 shots without reloading. The Americans had tanks, the powerful Sherman models that could destroy anything the Germans still had. They had trucks full of supplies. They looked healthy, well-fed, and confident. Von Richter's exhausted soldiers tried to fight back, but it was hopeless. Their old rifles jammed. Their few remaining vehicles had no fuel to escape. Within 10 minutes, the shooting stopped. 15 German soldiers lay dead or wounded. The Americans had not lost a single man. An American officer walked toward von Richter's truck. He was young, maybe 30 years old, with clear blue eyes and a farmer-strong build. His uniform was clean. His helmet sat straight on his head. He carried his rifle with the ease of someone who knew exactly how to use it. The officer spoke in clear German, which surprised von Richter. Many American soldiers had learned German from prisoners or from German-American families back home. The officer's accent was American, but his words were correct. Generals von Richter and Müller, I presume. I am Captain James Mitchell, United States Army, 3rd Infantry Division. I am asking you to surrender your forces to avoid further bloodshed. Von Richter looked at his men. They were surrounded. They were starving. They were defeated. He had known this moment would come. He had dreaded it every day for the past month. But now that it was here, he felt something unexpected. Relief. He stood slowly and unbuckled his pistol belt. The Luger pistol had been with him since 1939. It had traveled across Poland, France, and Russia. Now, it would end its journey in American hands. He held out to Captain Mitchell, handle first, in the traditional way of military surrender. Müller hesitated, then did the same. His hand shook slightly as he gave up his weapon. Captain Mitchell took both pistols with respect. He did not smile or mock them. He simply nodded and said, "Your men will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. Medical care will be provided for the wounded. You will be transported to a processing center." Von Richter had heard terrible stories about what Americans did to prisoners. The Nazi propaganda newspapers claimed that Americans tortured prisoners, starved them, and worked them to death. He had never believed these stories completely, but fear still crawled up his spine. What would happen now? The German soldiers were lined up and searched. The Americans took their weapons, but left them their personal items. Von Richter kept a small photograph of his wife Maria and daughter Sophie hidden in his jacket pocket. The American soldier who searched him felt it, but did not take it. That small mercy made Von Richter's throat tight with unexpected emotion. They were loaded into American trucks, much better maintained than the German vehicles. The trucks had fuel. They had working engines. They drove smoothly down roads that the German military could no longer use. During the ride, Von Richter sat next to a young American soldier who could not have been more than 20 years old. The soldier offered him a cigarette. Von Richter took it with shaking hands. He had not had a real cigarette in 2 months. In Germany, soldiers smoked dried leaves and whatever else they could find. The young American lit the cigarette for him. Von Richter inhaled deeply and closed his eyes. For just a moment, he felt almost human again. They arrived at a temporary POW processing center set up in an old German factory that had once made machine parts. Now, it processed defeated German officers instead of metal. Von Richter and Muller were separated from the regular soldiers and taken to a clean room with 2 cots, blankets, and even pillows. Muller sat on his cot and put his head in his hands. Von Richter stood by the small window, looking out at the American soldiers going about their duties. They moved with purpose and energy. They joked with each other. They looked nothing like the exhausted, terrified German soldiers he commanded. Outside, he heard American voices talking about dinner arrangements. Someone was cooking something. The smell drifted through the window, and Von Richter's stomach cramped with hunger. He had not eaten a real meal in 3 days. He turned to Muller and said quietly in German, "Whatever they offer us, we ask only for bread and water. We must maintain our dignity as German officers." Muller nodded slowly, but his eyes were fixed on the window, following that impossible smell of real food cooking somewhere in the American camp. The room was cleaner than anywhere Von Richter had slept in 6 months. The walls were intact with no bullet holes. The window had real glass, not boards or paper. The blanket on his cot was thick and warm, not the thin, lice-infested rags German soldiers wrapped themselves in during the freezing winter. But Von Richter could not rest. His stomach growled loudly in the quiet room. The hunger was not new. He had been hungry for months. All of Germany was hungry. But now, sitting in this clean room with nothing to do, the hunger became the only thing he could think about. Muller lay on his cot with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Neither man spoke for a long time. Outside, they heard American soldiers laughing about something. The sound was strange. German soldiers had forgotten how to laugh months ago. Von Richter's mind drifted back to 3 days earlier. His division had been hiding in a bombed-out school building near Nuremberg. The cook had made soup from water, a few potatoes, and 1 dead horse they found on the road. The potatoes had mold growing on them. The horse had been dead for at least 2 days. But the men ate it anyway, because it was all they had. 2 soldiers had gotten sick from that soup. They died the next morning, their bodies too weak to fight even a simple stomach illness. Von Richter had ordered them buried in a shallow grave behind the school. There was no time for proper ceremonies. There was never time anymore. The memory made his stomach hurt worse. He pushed it away and tried to think of better times. He thought of his wife's cooking, the Sunday dinners before the war when Sophie was still a little girl. Maria would make sauerbraten with red cabbage and potato dumplings. The meat would be so tender it fell apart on the fork. The smell would fill their small apartment in Munich and make everything feel right with the world. That world was gone now. Munich was mostly rubble. British and American bombers had destroyed 70% of the city. Von Richter did not know if his wife and daughter were even alive. The last letter he received was 4 months ago. Maria wrote that they were hiding in the basement during the bombing raids. Sophie, now 16 years old, was helping at a hospital because so many nurses had been killed. 4 months. Anything could have happened in 4 months. Muller suddenly spoke, breaking the silence. "Do you think they will torture us for information?" Von Richter turned from the window. "I do not know. The Americans claimed to follow the Geneva Convention rules for prisoners of war. But so did we, and we both know what happened in the camps." Neither man said more about the camps. They both knew. Everyone in the German military knew, even if they pretended not to. Von Richter had seen things in Poland and Russia that haunted his dreams. He had not participated directly, but he had seen and done nothing to stop it. That guilt was almost heavier than the hunger. Mueller sat up slowly. I heard the Russians shoot the officers immediately. Just line them up and shoot them. No questions, no trials, just bullets. We are with the Americans, not the Russians, von Richter said. But he was not sure that would make much difference. The Americans had seen the concentration camps when they liberated them. Von Richter had heard the stories from other prisoners. The Americans were horrified and angry at what they found. Would they want revenge? The propaganda newspapers that Joseph Goebbels printed always said the Americans were barbaric. They said Americans tortured German prisoners, cut off their fingers, burned them with cigarettes, and starved them slowly. Von Richter had never believed everything in those newspapers. Goebbels was a liar, and everyone knew it. But some fear remained. Another smell drifted through the window. Meat cooking. Real meat. Not horse or rat or whatever desperate German soldiers could find. Von Richter's Mut wartet involuntarily. He tried to swallow, but his throat was too wide. An American soldier appeared at the door with 2 metal cups full of water. He was young, perhaps 19, with red hair and freckles across his nose. He smiled politely and handed each general a cup. "Thank you," von Richter said in English. His English was not good, but he knew basic words. The soldier nodded and left. Von Richter stared at the water. It was clear and clean. In Germany, soldiers often drank from muddy streams or bomb craters filled with rainwater. Many got dysentery and died from bad water that he drank slowly, making it last. The water was cold and pure. It tasted like life itself. Mueller drank his water in 3 quick gulps, then immediately looked like he regretted it. "I should have made it last," he muttered. "There will be more," von Richter said, though he was not sure if that was true. Time passed slowly. The sun moved across the sky, visible through their window. Von Richter thought about his military career. He had joined the army in 1920, right after the First World War ended. Germany was broken and poor after that war. The Treaty of Versailles had punished Germany harshly. The economy collapsed. People starved in the streets. Then Hitler came with promises of making Germany strong again. Von Richter had believed those promises. Many good men had believed them. They wanted Germany to be proud again, to be powerful again. But Hitler's promises had led to this: a destroyed Germany, millions dead, cities turned to ash, and von Richter sitting as a prisoner in a clean room, waiting to learn his fate. Mueller spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "My son died for nothing." Von Richter had no answer for that. He thought it might be true, but saying it aloud felt like betraying every soldier who died under his command. At a knock came at the door. Both generals straightened up, tried to look dignified despite their dirty uniforms and exhausted faces. A different American soldier opened the door. He was older, maybe 40, with sergeant stripes on his sleeve. He had Asian features, which surprised von Richter. He had never seen an Asian person in military uniform before. The sergeant spoke in perfect German with no accent at all. "Generals, Captain Mitchell sends his respects. You will be questioned tomorrow after you have had time to rest. But first, dinner is ready. Please come with me." Dinner. The word hung in the air like a promise or maybe a threat. Von Richter and Müller exchanged glances. This was the moment von Richter had been thinking about. They would go, they would be offered food, and they would ask only for bread and water. That was proper. They maintained their dignity as German officers. They stood and followed the sergeant down a hallway. The smell of cooking food grew stronger with every step. Von Richter's stomach twisted painfully. He had not realized how hungry he truly was until that smell surrounded him completely, making his head spin and his knees weak. Whatever happened next, he told himself, they would face it with honor. The mess hall was nothing fancy, just a large room with long tables and benches, like a school cafeteria. But to von Richter, it looked impossibly organized and clean. American soldiers sat eating their dinner, talking and laughing like men who had never known real war. Some glanced at the 2 German generals, but without hatred in their eyes. Just curiosity, like seeing exotic animals in a zoo. Captain Mitchell stood near a table that had been set apart from the others. He gestured for von Richter and Muller to sit. The sergeant with Asian features stood nearby, ready to translate if needed, though Mitchell seemed to speak German well enough. Von Richter sat down slowly. His back hurt from months of sleeping on hard ground or in damaged vehicles. Muller sat beside him, his face pale and tense. Both generals prepared themselves for what came next. They had practiced their words during the walk to the mess hall. "We request only bread and water, as is proper for prisoners of war. Nothing more. We are grateful for your mercy in keeping us alive." Before von Richter could speak, two American cooks appeared from a kitchen area. They wore clean white aprons and looked well-fed and healthy. Each carried a metal tray, and they placed these trays in front of the two German generals. Von Richter looked down at the tray and felt his brain stop working that a thick steak, still sizzling slightly, covered half the plate. Beside it were mashed potatoes with real butter melting on top. Green beans, not from a can, but looking fresh and properly cooked. Two slices of white bread with more butter. And next to the plate sat a grilled sandwich cut in half, with real cheese melting out the sides and bits of ham visible between the bread. Muller made a sound like someone had punched him in the stomach. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Von Richter stared at the food. He could not move. His mind could not process what he was seeing. This was not real. This could not be real. This was the kind of meal he had not seen since before the war started in 1939. 6 years ago. This was the kind of meal that did not exist anymore, not anywhere in Europe, not for anyone. "Sir," Captain Mitchell spoke, his voice concerned. "Is something wrong?" Von Richter forced himself to look up. His throat was tight. His eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. He spoke carefully in English. Try to remember the words. "Captain Mitchell, we only request bread and water. We cannot." Mitchell looked genuinely confused. "Sir, I don't understand. This is dinner. Standard rations for the camp. Everyone eats the same thing here." The sergeant with Asian features spoke in German. "General von Richter, Captain Mitchell is asking what the problem is. This is normal American military food. All soldiers receive this. All soldiers," Muller whispered, still staring at his plate. "This is what American soldiers eat every day." "Yes, sir," the sergeant replied. "Sometimes better, actually. When we were in base camps, we get even more variety." Von Richter's mind struggled with this information. In Germany, soldiers were eating grass soup. In some units, men were dying of starvation. Officers got slightly more food than regular soldiers, but even officer rations were just thin soup and hard bread made from sawdust mixed with flour. The German army had not seen real meat in months. Children in German cities were eating tulip bulbs and tree bark to survive. And here, American prisoners of war were being served steak. Captain Mitchell pulled out a chair and sat down across from them. He looked at both generals with patient eyes. "Gentlemen, the war is over for you. You surrendered honorably. You will be treated according to international law. We don't starve prisoners. We don't torture. We feed everyone the same food our own men eat. That is how America does things." Von Richter looked at the steak again. His hand shook as he slowly picked up the fork. It was real metal, not bent or broken. The knife was actually sharp. He cut a small piece of his steak, watching the juice run out. The meat was cooked medium, still pink in the middle, exactly how he used to prefer it in the old days. He put the meat in his mouth. The taste exploded across his tongue, like a forgotten memory coming back all at once. Real beef, properly seasoned, tender and rich and full of flavor. His body responded immediately. Saliva flooded his mouth. His stomach cramped with desperate need. He chewed slowly, trying to make it last, but his body wanted to devour everything on the plate in seconds. Beside him, Muller cut his own steak with shaking hands. He took a bite and closed his eyes. A single tear ran down his weathered cheek. He did not try to hide it. Von Richter tried the mashed potatoes. They were smooth and creamy with real butter and milk, not the watery paste made from powder that German soldiers sometimes got. These were made from actual potatoes, peeled and cooked and mashed with care. Around them, American soldiers continued eating and talking. Some glanced over at the German generals, but no one stared or pointed or laughed. They just ate their own identical meals and went about their business. The young American private, maybe 20 years old, walked past their table carrying a salt shaker. He noticed von Richter looking at his food and stopped. "You need salt, sir?" he asked in broken German. Von Richter nodded, not trusting his voice. The private set down the salt shaker and added a pepper shaker beside it. He gave a small nod and walked away. That simple gesture of courtesy, of treating them like human beings worthy of basic respect, broke something inside von Richter. He had commanded men who committed terrible acts. He had followed orders from a government that murdered millions. He had believed in a cause that destroyed his country and most of Europe. And now, defeated and captured, he sat eating steak while an enemy soldier offered him salt and pepper. The sandwich was still waiting. Von Richter picked up one half and bit into it. The bread was soft and fresh. The cheese was real and melted perfectly. The ham was thick and smoky. It was the kind of sandwich his daughter Sophie used to beg for on Saturday afternoons when they would go to the park before the war. Sophie. Was she still alive? Was she eating anything at all? In Germany, 16-year-old girls were starving, hiding from bombs, watching their world burn. And here her father sat, a prisoner, eating better than he had eaten in years. Muller finished his steak and stared at his empty plate like he could not believe what had just happened. He looked at von Richter with wide eyes and whispered in German, "Everything they told us was lies. Everything." Von Richter nodded slowly. The Nazi propaganda had painted Americans as monsters who would torture and kill German prisoners. Instead, they served them steak. The contrast was so extreme it felt like madness. Captain Mitchell stood up. "Gentlemen, there is coffee and dessert if you want it. Apple pie tonight. Take your time. No one will rush you. Coffee. Real coffee. An apple pie." Von Richter set down his fork. He looked directly at Captain Mitchell and asked the question that burned in his mind. "Captain, why do you do this? We are your enemies. We killed your soldiers. Why do you treat us this way?" Mitchell's face became serious. He thought for a moment before answering. "General, the war is over for you. You're not my enemy anymore. You're just a man who needs food and rest. That's all. When this war ends, we all go home. We don't keep fighting forever." He paused, then added, "Besides, sir, treating prisoners well is not just about mercy. It's about who we are. We don't become monsters just because we fight monsters." With that, Captain Mitchell nodded respectfully and walked away, leaving the two German generals sitting with their empty plates and their shattered understanding of the world. An American cook brought coffee in white ceramic cups. The coffee was hot and black and smelled like something from another lifetime. Von Richter wrapped his cold hands around the cup and felt the warmth spread through his fingers. In Germany, they made coffee from roasted acorns and chicory root. This was real coffee from real coffee beans. Captain Mitchell returned with his own cup and sat down across from them again. The sergeant with Asian features stood nearby, ready to help translate the more complicated parts of the conversation. The mess hall was emptying as soldiers finished their meals and left for their evening duties. Muller had not spoken much since finishing his steak. Now he looked at Captain Mitchell with confusion in his eyes. "I do not understand. In Germany, we were told Americans torture prisoners. We were told you would work us to death or simply shoot us. But you give us steak. Why?" Mitchell sipped his coffee before answering. "What you were told was propaganda, General. Lies meant to make you fight harder, to make you afraid of surrendering. The truth is simpler. We follow the Geneva Convention. We treat prisoners the way we would want our own prisoners treated." Von Richter thought about the German prisoners taken by the Soviets on the Eastern Front. Those men were marched to Siberia and worked in terrible camps where many died from cold and starvation. The Germans had treated Soviet prisoners just as badly, maybe worse. Millions of Soviet prisoners died in German camps. The Eastern Front was a war without mercy on either side, but the Western Front was different. The sergeant seemed to read von Richter's thoughts and spoke in German. "My name is Robert Shun, but everyone calls me Bobby. My parents came to America from China. I grew up in San Francisco. When the war started, I volunteered." "You are Chinese?" Muller asked, his curiosity showing. The German army had no Asian soldiers. Hitler's racial theories did not allow such things. Chinese American. Bobby corrected with a slight smile. America is different from Germany in that way. We have people from everywhere. Irish, Italian, Mexican, Chinese, Japanese, even though the Japanese Americans had trouble during the war. Black soldiers, too, though they serve in separate units, which is wrong, but that's another conversation. We're not perfect generals. We have our own problems with racism and hatred, but we try to do better. Captain Mitchell nodded. Bobby is right. America is not perfect. My own grandfather came from Ireland during the potato famine. When he arrived, there were signs in Boston saying no Irish need apply for jobs. People hated the Irish back then. But things change. Slowly, maybe too slowly, but they change. Von Richter absorbed these words. The Nazi philosophy taught that some races were superior and others were inferior. It taught that mixing races was dangerous and wrong. It taught that Germany must be pure. These teachings had led to the murder of millions. Jews, Poles, Russians, Roma, anyone the Nazis decided was not worthy of life. Captain Mitchell, von Richter said slowly, choosing his words with care. I must ask you something difficult. Have you seen the camps? The concentration camps? Mitchell's face became hard as stone. Yes, General. I have seen them. Buchenwald, Dachau, others. I saw things there that I will never forget. Things that will haunt me until the day I die. The room became very quiet. Even the sounds from the kitchen seemed to fade away. I did not know, Muller whispered. Not the full truth of it. We heard rumors, but I did not know how bad it was. Von Richter wanted to say the same thing, but he stopped himself. He had known something. Maybe not every detail, but enough. He had seen Jews being rounded up in Poland. He had seen the trains. He had heard the whispers and looked away because looking away was easier than facing the truth. I am guilty, von Richter said quietly. Perhaps not directly, but I am guilty. I served the regime. I followed orders. I knew something terrible was happening, and I did nothing to stop it. Captain Mitchell studied him for a long moment. You know what the strange thing is, General? I hate what your government did. I hate the Nazi ideology. I hate Hitler and Himmler and all the men who created those camps. But sitting here, talking with you, I don't hate you. You're just a tired old soldier who followed bad leaders and made bad choices. Like a lot of people did. My brother died at Normandy, Bobby added softly. June 6, 1944. He was 22 years old, shot on Omaha Beach. I could hate every German soldier for that. But what would that change? Will my brother come back? Muller looked down at his empty coffee cup. My son died outside Stalingrad in January 1943. He was 20 years old. He froze to death in a trench. I received a letter from his commanding officer saying he died for Germany's glory. But there was no glory, just cold and death and waste. The Battle of Stalingrad had been one of the bloodiest battles in human history. The German Sixth Army, over 200,000 men, had been surrounded by Soviet forces. Hitler ordered them to fight to the last man. Most died from cold, starvation, or Soviet bullets. Only about 6,000 survived to return home years later. The war killed our sons, Captain Mitchell said. German sons, American sons, Russian sons, British sons. Sons from every country, all sent to die by old men who stayed safe in offices and bunkers. Von Richter felt something shift inside him. For years, he had thought of the war in terms of Germany versus the Allies, of military objectives and strategic goals. But sitting in this mess hall, drinking coffee with men who were supposed to be his enemies, he suddenly saw it differently. The war was not Germans against Americans. It was young men dying while old men gave orders. It was mothers losing sons. It was children starving. It was humanity destroying itself for reasons that seemed smaller with each passing day. What will happen to us now? Von Richter asked. Where will we be sent? A permanent POW camp, probably in Texas or somewhere else in the American Southwest, Mitchell replied. You will stay there until the war officially ends and treaties are signed. Then eventually, you will go home to Germany. It might be a year, maybe two, but you will go home. To what? Muller asked bitterly. Germany is destroyed. Our cities are rubble. Our people starve. What kind of home is that? A home you can rebuild, Bobby said firmly. Japan bombed Pearl Harbor and killed thousands of Americans. In a few months, we will defeat Japan too. But after that, we will help Japan rebuild. We will help Germany rebuild too. Not out of kindness, but because a destroyed, angry Germany will just cause another war in 20 years. We learned that lesson after the First World War. The Treaty of Versailles after World War I had punished Germany so harshly that it helped create the conditions for Hitler to rise to power. This time, it seemed the Americans planned to do things differently. An American soldier brought apple pie on small plates. The pie was warm with a golden crust and sweet apple filling. Von Richter took a bite and remembered his wife making apple strudel on autumn afternoons when apples were cheap at the market. "Captain Mitchell," Von Richter said after a moment, "thank you for treating us with dignity. You did not have to do this. After what Germany did, after the camps and the death and the destruction, you had every right to treat us badly. But you gave us steak instead of bread. I will remember that." Mitchell stood up and straightened his uniform. "General, this war has shown me the worst things humans can do to each other. But it has also shown me that we can choose to be better. We can choose mercy over revenge. That choice defines who we are more than any battle we win or lose." He saluted them, a proper military salute between officers, even though they were enemies. Von Richter and Muller stood and saluted back. It was a strange moment of respect between men who had spent years trying to kill each other. As Captain Mitchell walked away, Von Richter sat back down and finished his apple pie. Tomorrow they would be transported to America, to a prison camp on the other side of the world. But tonight, for the first time in years, he felt something close to hope. The morning sun came through the window and touched Von Richter's face with unusual gentleness. For a moment, still half asleep, he forgot where he was. Then memory returned. He was a prisoner. The war was over. But instead of fear, he felt something he had not felt in years. He felt rested. The cot was not comfortable by peacetime standards, but compared to months of sleeping on frozen ground or in bomb buildings, it was luxury. The blanket had kept him warm all night. No artillery shells had exploded nearby. No air raid sirens had screamed warnings. Just silence and safety and 8 hours of actual sleep. Muller was already awake, sitting on his cot and staring at his hands. Those hands had signed orders, commanded troops, and made decisions that sent men to their deaths. Now they just rested on his knees, empty and still. An American soldier knocked politely on the door and entered with 2 breakfast trays. He set them down on a small table and left without saying anything. Von Richter looked at the trays and felt that same shock from the night before. Scrambled eggs. Real eggs, yellow and fluffy, not the powdered substitute German soldiers sometimes got. Bacon, crispy and smelling like heaven. Toast with butter and jam. A glass of orange juice that glowed like liquid sunshine. And coffee, hot and black and real. Muller laughed suddenly, a harsh sound without much humor. "I cannot believe this. I cannot believe any of this is real." They ate slowly, trying to make every bite last. The eggs were perfectly cooked. The bacon was salty and rich. The orange juice tasted like something from before the war, from a time when citrus fruits were not impossibly rare luxuries. After breakfast, Bobby Chun arrived to prepare them for transport. He brought them Red Cross packages, the international aid packages given to prisoners of war. Each package contained chocolate bars, cigarettes, canned meat, crackers, and other supplies. Von Richter held the chocolate bar and felt its weight in his hand. In Germany, children had not seen chocolate in years. "You will be transported with other captured officers to a camp in Texas," Bobby explained in German. "The journey will take time. First by truck, then by ship across the Atlantic Ocean, then by train across America. You will keep these packages. There will be more food during the journey." Other German officers were being processed in the same building. Von Richter saw colonels and majors and captains, all wearing the same expression of confused disbelief. They had all expected torture or starvation. Instead, they got breakfast and Red Cross packages that a young German lieutenant, barely 25 years old, approached Von Richter. His uniform was even more damaged than Von Richter's, torn and stained with mud and blood. "General Von Richter, sir," What are the Americans like? We heard terrible things. Are they going to kill us? Von Richter looked at the young man's frightened face. How many times had he sent men this age to die for a cause that was already lost? How many mothers would never see their sons again because of orders he had signed? Lieutenant, Von Richter said carefully, everything we were told was lies. The Americans follow their rules for prisoners. They feed us the same food their own soldiers eat. They treat us with basic dignity. Whatever you are afraid of, it will not happen here. The lieutenant's face showed relief mixed with confusion. But sir, we killed their soldiers. We bombed their cities before they came to Europe. Why would they treat us well? Because, Von Richter said slowly, working through the thoughts that had kept him awake part of the night, their strength comes from their values, not just their weapons. They choose to be better than their enemies. That is something we Germans forgot to do. Muller had been quiet all morning, but now he spoke. The lieutenant asked a good question, Klaus. Why do they do this? They have every reason to hate us. Von Richter thought about Captain Mitchell's words from the night before, about choosing mercy over revenge, about not becoming monsters while fighting monsters. They do it because they can afford to, he finally said. America was not bombed into rubble. Their children are not starving. Their cities still stand. They are strong enough to be merciful. We Germans, we became so afraid and so desperate that we forgot how to be human. We forgot that mercy is not weakness. The preparation for transport took most of the morning. German officers were organized into groups, given instructions through translators, and loaded onto American trucks. Von Richter noticed that the trucks were full of fuel and ran smoothly. German vehicles at the end of the war were falling apart, running on synthetic fuel that barely worked, if they ran at all. Captain Mitchell appeared one last time before they left. He shook hands with Von Richter and Muller, a formal gesture between military officers. General Von Richter, Mitchell said, I hope you and your family survive what comes next. Germany will be hard for many years, but it will recover. You can help make sure it recovers and is something better than what it was. Von Richter nodded. Captain Mitchell, I will tell this story when I return home. I will tell how you gave us steak when we asked only for bread. Maybe that story will help Germans understand what kind of country America truly is. We are not perfect, Mitchell reminded him, but we try. That is all any country can do. Try to be better than yesterday. They saluted each other one final time. Then Von Richter climbed into the truck with the other German officers. The engine started with a powerful rumble. American soldiers checked that everyone was secure. Then the convoy began moving. Von Richter looked out the back of the truck as they drove away from the processing center. American soldiers went about their duties, maintaining equipment, cooking food, preparing for the next day's work. They looked confident and well-organized, like men who knew they were winning and knew what would come after. As the truck rolled through the German countryside, Von Richter saw the destruction the war had brought. Destroyed villages, burned fields, bridges blown apart, forests torn by artillery. This was Germany now. This was what following Hitler had created. But he also saw German civilians working in the fields, trying to plant crops for the next season. He saw children playing in the ruins, finding joy even in devastation. He saw old women hanging laundry, continuing the simple rituals of daily life despite everything. Life continued. Somehow, impossibly, life continued. Klaus, Muller said quietly, using his first name for the first time in years. Do you think we can ever go back to who we were before the war? Von Richter thought about that question. Could he go back to being the man who believed in Germany's glory? The man who thought military strength meant rightness? The man who looked away from evil because confronting it was difficult? No, he said finally. We cannot go back, but maybe we can go forward to something better. Maybe Germany can learn from this defeat. Learn that true strength is not about conquest or domination. It is about building things instead of destroying them, about feeding people instead of starving them, about mercy instead of cruelty. A young German captain sitting across from them had been listening. Do you really believe that, General? After everything that has happened, do you believe Germany can change? Von Richter looked at the young officer. This man would be part of Germany's future if he survived. I believe he must try. What other choice do we have? We can drown in bitterness and hatred, or we can learn from our mistakes and build something new. The Americans are giving us a chance by not treating us the way we treated others. The least we can do is try to deserve that mercy. The truck convoy drove on through the spring afternoon. In the distance, von Richter could see the Alps, those ancient mountains that had watched over Germany for thousands of years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had seen wars come and go. They would still be there long after this war was forgotten. Inside his jacket pocket, von Richter felt the photograph of Maria and Sophie. He did not know if they were alive. He did not know what Germany would become. He did not know if he would ever see his home again. But for the first time in years, he had hope. It was a small hope, fragile as a candle flame in a dark room. But it was there. The Americans had given him steak when he asked for bread. They had shown him mercy when they could have shown cruelty. They had treated him like a human being when he had helped lead a nation that forgot what humanity meant. That single meal, that simple act of kindness, had taught him more about strength and honor than 4 years of warfare ever could. As the truck carried him toward an uncertain future, von Richter made himself a promise. If he survived, if he made it home, if Germany rose from these ashes, he would remember this lesson. He would tell this story. And maybe, just maybe, other Germans would listen and learn that true victory comes not from crushing your enemies, but from remaining human even when the world gives you every reason to become a monster. The war was ending. For von Richter, sitting in an American truck with a full stomach and a small seed of hope in his heart, a different kind of battle was just beginning. The battle to rebuild. The battle to remember. The battle to become better than he had been. It would not be easy. But then again, nothing worth doing ever was.